going to do it. Every week I battle, and this week I got it. Let's hope you still stay here.
Welcome, welcome.
Very good. How are you, yours?
I'm getting over the flu, just still coughing a bit.
Okay.
Every week I battle, and this week I got it. Let's hope you still stay here.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome.
Hope you stay here.
Very good.
So I came through the speaker.
Hang on. I got to set up the YouTube and the screen share. Let's see.
I won't disturb you. I just could hear that you were sick every time you spoke. Your voice sounded really, something was wrong. Yeah.
Where did you hear me?
Whatever, your daily stuff, whatever's around. I listen to you wherever you are, if possible.
Thank you. Just give me a minute.
Very excited that I'm on.
Rather technical today, so don't be put off.
No, I won't disturb you. I'm in the kitchen.
I'm getting there. Yeah. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay.
You cleaned out, now it's starting a new thing. This always happens. Clean out, then it starts again. Huh? Kind of happens. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good day. Good day. I'm just getting on.
Oh, there you are. I can see you.
Well, yeah.
Okay, we're it's a minute to 1, so Give it another few minutes. Hopefully we'll get some more customers.
I'm still here, Jos. Not
Okay.
going away. I'm just muting you.
Okay.
Muting me.
Yeah, don't mute. You can't mute me, I'm afraid. If you mute me, there's no share.
Okay.
Okay.
Funny.
Where is everybody today?
Slash tortoise.
I sent the reminder 20 minutes ago. So who was here yesterday? Did you do yesterday's? This is interesting stuff, but it's quite technical. Oh. Hello, Kent.
Well, Rabbi, how are you doing?
Thank God getting there. So far, 2 out of our 3 students are from Cape Town.
Hi, Dennis. Hi, Dot.
Seems to me the ratio of Torah students in Cape Town is bigger than Johannesburg.
Oh, right.
You're not the only one who says that. We are used to learning here in Cape Town.
Maybe they're all from Constantia too.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Just hang on, you'll see people are always a bit late.
Okay, we'll wait another moment or two.
You function on, like 1 or 2 others, they function on Yeka time and others on Chabad time.
You know about the Yeka child of a Yeka who married a child of a Chabadnik.
Tell me.
They would come exactly a half hour late to every function, but exactly.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to get started, and whoever's here is here, and those who come late will have to catch up. Okay, so Parah Aduma, chapter 8, the red heifer. We're not talking here about the heifer itself. Today we're talking about sanctifying and drawing the water for the red heifer. So, as you know, I assume you've learned the previous chapters of this section. The red heifer was a very rare animal. I think I gave chapter 1 last week. And it would be used to purify those who had come into contact with the dead. It is the chok, the statutory decree of Torah, which we don't understand the logic behind it. Why would have to find a reddish, brownish red cow, slaughter it, burn it, mix the ashes with specially sanctified water and other ingredients and sprinkle it over those who have become tamei by contact with the dead for them to be purified. That's the basics. Now today we're going to focus on the drawing and the sanctifying of the water, which was very, very demanding, punctilious, and technical and strict. And the slightest deviation from kavanah and dedication and concentration on the act at hand would deem it unacceptable. So it's because it's such a sacred thing, there could be no distractions allowed. When you were busy doing the drawing and the sanctifying of the water, you had to be completely dedicated to that and not do anything else at the same time. Now, some people, particularly women, are very good at multitasking, but multitasking while you're doing this would not be permissible. The only tasks you could do were things which were relevant and pertinent directly to the sanctifying and the drawing and the sanctifying of the water. Any distraction, deviation, doing anything else at the same time would disqualify the whole process. And you got to go back to go. Okay, Aleph. Mi shehoyu meimel v'al kseifa. The person's carrying the water for the ashes of the red heifer on his shoulders. And on the way, maybe he's a rabbi, and he gets asked shilas and gets asked to do things on the way. So let's say he was asked a shaila and he delivered a halachic ruling, rendered a judgment. A woman performed chalitza in his presence. I mean, this is unbelievable. That's so such an unusual thing that could happen. You know, chalitza is a very rare thing, and it happens in the Beth Din. But here's a guy walking down the road, and the woman performs chalitza in his presence with her brother-in-law. If chalitza is if a man dies without children, then the brother, if he has a brother, he was duty bound to marry the widow. Unless they didn't want to, then she would perform chalitza. I'm not going to go into that now. Or a girl performed miyun in his presence. That's something similar. It's not quite chalitza, it's different. But it's, I think if a girl was put by her father into a marriage when she was a minor, when she becomes majority age, she can say, no thanks, this is not for me, and walk out, and she doesn't need a get or anything. It's called miyun. Or he gave directions to others, or he killed a snake or a scorpion that did not present a threat to him. So that would have been a distraction. If it's presenting a threat to him and he's on the way to mix the water with the ashes, then he has to get there, so that's necessary. But if they did not present a threat to him, then he was distracted. Or he took food from the market to set aside for lunch afterwards. In all of the above cases, the water is disqualified. So he should not be rendering judgments. He should not be performing chalitza ceremonies. He should not be killing snakes or doing anything else, because it's not the immediate task at hand. Right now, he should be focused 1,000% only on getting the water to the ashes. And any distraction, interruption, disqualifies the whole procedure. Rationale being, he occupied himself with another activity before placing the ashes in the water. However, if what he's doing is necessary to get him there, it might be the same things almost, but it would prevent him from getting there, so he has to do it to get them out of his way, then it will be fine. So if however he took food in order to eat while he's going, he needs to survive and he needs to eat to keep moving, to have strength to go. Or he killed a snake or scorpion that was preventing his progress. He can't get to the ashes unless he gets rid of the snake and scorpion. So it's all part of the process. That's not an interruption. It's not a distraction. Then the water is acceptable. For these activities are necessary to carry the water. So here's the rule. Any activity that's considered as work which was performed before placing the ashes on the water, whether he stood still or not, disqualifies the water. If it's work, meaning work, other work. When he performs an activity that is not considered as work, it's not work, he's just doing something to get himself to finish the job. If he does not stand still, it keeps moving, the water is acceptable. If he stands still, it is disqualified. However, I have a Chayenu booklet, and he tells me here that if he has to kill these predators while standing still, that would not be a problem. But if he could do things while keeping moving, then if he stands still, it would disqualify. But in the case of the snake or the scorpion, for example, if he has to stand still to kill them, that would not disqualify it. If he was walking while carrying such water, and while he was walking, he made an opening to walk through. So he's got to go through a field, excuse me, and he's got to say, cut the grass or push the grass aside to get through. Or there's a gate that he has to push open or something. That's all part of the job to get there, so it's still acceptable. If he closes the gate or the opening before placing the ashes on the water, now he's disqualified it. What does closing it have to do with getting the water to the ashes? That's an outside thing. It's external. It's an interference. He should not have done. He should come back later after he does the water, then he can close up and do everything. But if he closes before he continues on his way, he's now disqualified. Similarly, if he dries fruit to eat, even if later he intends to dry the remainder, the water is acceptable. He's basically preparing food for himself to eat now so he can get to the place. If he dries the remaining fruit, which is not for now for his immediate needs, it's only for later, which is not relevant to his task at hand, then it's a problem. It's disqualified. So that they have the basic rule that if he's doing things to help get him to finish the job of bringing the water to the ashes, even if it's external things, but they're blocking him from doing it, or he needs to have food to be able to have kayach to get there, that's fine. But if he does something that is only for later, it has no relevance to the immediate job at hand, he is now disqualified. 2, if one was applied, if one was eating while carrying such water, he left over some food and cast the leftovers under a fig tree or a net used to dry figs. If his intent was to prevent the food from perishing, it's disqualified because he's doing work, which is only for later. If he cast it away because he no longer needs it, he's finished eating, he throws away whatever's left he doesn't need, that's acceptable. He hasn't done any work there. If he drew water to sanctify it, then he had to go do something. So what did he do? He entrusted the water to someone else to look after it, to a watchman. He said, please look after my water, keep an eye on it. I have to do something urgent. So he drew water to sanctify, then entrusted it to a watchman to oversee. Not a problem. Even if this owner was performing work, because he entrusted it to a shaliach, to an agent, an emissary of his, to be the watchman. So it's being looked after. There's no deviation. If the watchman, however, who's supposed to be watching it, if he does work now he's disqualified because the water is in his domain and he takes the place of the owner. And if he does work, now he's messed up. If 2 people are watching such water and one performs work, that's still okay because there's still someone else to watch it. If the first returned to his watch and the second stood up and performed work, also fine. There's always one guy watching it, no problem. Unless they're both working at the same time, then it disqualifies. 3. The following rules apply when a person sanctifies water with one hand and does work with the other. If he sanctifies the water for himself, he disqualified because he performed work before casting the ashes on the water. However, if he sanctified water for someone else, the water is acceptable because a person does not disqualify a colleague's water with the performance of such work. He can only disqualify his own, not someone else's. For the performance of work does not disqualify the act of sanctification, it only disqualifies the water. And that only when the one performing the work is a watchman or the owner, the watchman for the owner or the owner itself. But it doesn't mess up someone else's. Okay. Yeah. When a person sanctifies water for himself and a colleague did I just do that? No. 4. When a person sanctifies water for himself and a colleague at the same time, his water is disqualified because the activity performed in sanctifying his colleague's water, he's busy doing another job at the same time. Even though it's a job related to the paradua, but it's not his job, it's someone else's job. So that's considered an interruption. So it disqualifies his own, but not the colleagues. If, however, he sanctifies water belonging to 2 other people at the same time, they are both acceptable because the performance of work does not disqualify water belonging to others. So if he's doing stuff for 2 other people, not for himself, then it's okay. But if he's doing for himself and even 1 other person, it's not okay. When a person fills 2 buckets with his 2 hands for himself and sanctifies them at once, they are disqualified. Let me read you a note I have here on this. We suspect that he filled the bucket before he sanctified the existing bucket. Hence, filling this bucket is considered as an activity that disqualifies the existing bucket. Then, sanctifying the existing bucket is considered an activity that disqualifies the bucket that was now filled. All right, let me come back to this. It's a little bit complicated. 5. When a person fills 2 buckets with his 2 hands for himself and sanctifies them at once, they're disqualified. We'll soon see why. If he sanctifies them individually, 1 at a time, it's acceptable. If he sanctifies water for himself with both hands at the same time in one sanctification, also acceptable. If he sanctified 2 buckets at the same time, they're both disqualified. If with his 2 hands he filled 1 bucket of water and sanctified another existing bucket for himself, they are both disqualified. That's what I was reading this comment about. Let me read it now. We suspect that he filled the bucket before he sanctified the existing bucket. That means the second bucket. Hence, filling this bucket is now an interruption because he hasn't yet sanctified the first one. Then, sanctifying the existing bucket is considered an activity that disqualifies the bucket that was now filled. If, however, he sanctified the existing bucket first and then filled the new bucket, then both are acceptable. So if he's doing 2 things at the same time, it's a disqualification. It has to be limited to what he's doing at the moment. If he filled 2 buckets with his 2 hands for another person at the same time, when they are sanctified at once, they're both acceptable. If they were sanctified individually, they're disqualified. If he sanctifies water for another person with both hands at the same time as one sanctification, it's acceptable. If with his 2 hands he filled 1 bucket of water and sanctified another existing bucket for another person, the bucket he filled is disqualified, but the bucket he sanctified for the other fellow is acceptable. Because when he by doing the thing for the other guy while he's still busy with his own thing, he distracted himself. The general rule, whenever work was performed when water was drawn, whether one drew the water for himself or for another person, it is disqualified because we're talking about all different types of work, which are interruptions and and distractions from the job at hand. Whenever water was drawn according to law, then one performed work before placing the ashes upon it. If the water belonged to him, it's disqualified. If it belongs to someone else, it's acceptable. In any situation when the water is in his hand and he performs work, whether there is a watchman who does not perform work, or whether there is no watchman, the water is disqualified because he's doing work while the water is in his hand. It's a distraction. When the water is not in his hand and he performed work, if there's a watchman, so he's looking after it, so it's not a problem, like we learned before. There's no watchman and he's doing work, it's a distraction and disqualified.
Yeah.
Sorry? 6, when a person tells a colleague, let's make a deal. I'll do you, you do mine. Sanctify water for me, and I will sanctify water for you. And they sanctify water for each other. Guess what? The first is acceptable. The second is disqualified. Why? Because he received a wage for sanctifying, which you're not allowed to do. So this is interesting. So in chapter 7, which you learned yesterday, we learned that idea. So the first bucket that was sanctified is not disqualified because at the time it was sanctified, the one sanctifying it had not received payment. And in the end, he's not going to receive payment because his bucket will be disqualified. However, the second bucket is disqualified because the person who sanctified it, the owner of the first bucket, did receive payment. The sanctification is bucket. So he didn't get cash, but he got in kind. He got a sanctified bucket. So you're not allowed to get paid for that. So that disqualifies it. So again, 6, if he says sanctify for me and I'll sanctify for you, and they did it for each other, the first is accepted, the second is disqualified. If one tells the other, draw water for me, okay, there's two things. They're sanctifying the water and they're drawing the water. First we draw it, then we sanctify. So the first we said was sanctify. Now if he says, draw the water for me, and I will draw the water for you, and they drew water for each other, the first is unacceptable, because since his intent was that his colleague should draw water for him in exchange, it is considered as if he drew water for himself and another person at the same time, in which instance the water is disqualified. However, the second bucket is acceptable because when it comes to drawing the water, you're allowed to receive payment. For sanctifying, you may not, but for drawing, you may. So it's permitted to receive payment for drawing water, and he did not perform work after drawing the water, nor did he have an intent regarding another drawing of water. He just did it for himself, so it's fine. 7, when a person tells a friend, sanctify water for me and I will draw water for you. Okay, so I'm going to sanctify and you're going to draw, not doing the same exact thing. They're both acceptable. Why? Work does not disqualify sanctification, and it is permitted to receive a wage for drawing the water. Okay? Interesting. So the sanctification is when you mix the water with the ashes, and the drawing the water is drawing it from the special stream or well that they had. Shiloach, I think. Now, if one tells the other, draw water for me and I will sanctify water for you, they are both disqualified. So in the first paragraph of 7, he says, sanctify water for me and I'll draw water for you, both acceptable. If it's the other way around, you draw water for me and I will sanctify water for you, they're both disqualified. Why? The water drawn originally is disqualified because it is considered as if he drew water and sanctified at the same time, which you're not allowed to do, and thus caused the water he drew to be disqualified because he was working at the same time. And the water sanctified afterwards is disqualified because it is as if he sanctified water for a wage, which we learned you're not allowed to do. 8, the last one, but it's a long one. When a person goes to sanctify water for the ashes of the red heifer, may take the key to the closet where the ashes are kept. Okay, so they obviously kept the ashes in a special place in the temple somewhere. So now he's going to gotta mix the water, the specially drawn water, and sanctify it by mixing it with the ashes. So he's going to sanctify the water for the ashes of the red heifer. He may take the key to the closet where the ashes are kept and open it to take out the ashes. This is not considered work. This is all part of the job at hand. If it is necessary to dig out the ashes, sometimes they put it under the ground, I think. He may take a hatchet to dig up the ground. He may take a ladder and carry it from place to bring the ashes if he has to climb up to get it somewhere. Because it's all for the purpose of getting the ashes. So it's not a distraction. In all these circumstances, the water and the ashes remain acceptable. If after taking the ashes for the sanctification, he covered, sorry, 1 second. If after taking the ashes for the sanctification, he covered the container in which the ashes were held, locked the door of the closet, or stood the container where the ashes were held upright on the ground for casting the ashes in the water is disqualified. Why? Because this is not the job at hand. After you finish the job, then close up, clean up, do whatever you have to do. But before you finish the job, you don't do this stuff. That's a distraction, an interruption. But the ashes are acceptable to sanctify other water, so you'd have to get other water. If by contrast he stood the container in which the ashes were held upright in his hand, so that the remaining ashes would not be scattered, it's acceptable, because it's impossible to do otherwise. So it's all part of the job. It's not for later, it's for now. If he places it down on the ground, the water is disqualified. If he covers it, it's disqualified, because he doesn't have to do that now to get the job done. If he took ashes and saw that the amount was excessive, he took more than he needed, didn't have enough water for so much ashes. And returns some of the ashes, it's acceptable, all part of the job. If he cast the ashes on the water and then returns some, still acceptable. If he cast the ashes on the water and saw that the amount was excessive and took some to sanctify other water, also acceptable. If he trimmed an olive leaf to use it as some kind of utensil, like a spoon or what do they call that? They used to take a piece of cake or something.
A ladle or a
something like that. Not quite a ladle. That's not the word.
No.
It's for chicken soup. But if you want to take a slice of cake, what was it called?
Cake fork.
What? Say that again, please.
Like a cake fork, that type of thing.
Okay, whatever. Okay. Anyway, he trimmed an olive leaf to use as a utensil to cast the ashes. So it will depend on what was his intention. If his intention was, though, that the leaf would not hold much ashes, it's disqualified. If the intent was to direct the flow of the ashes, to use it sort of as a cylinder, so that they would enter the container holding the water, then it is acceptable. So basically, the bottom line of all of these, this whole chapter, all the halachas, is that
the word, I think the word we were looking for is a lifter.
Yes, correct. Thank you. A lifter, right.
a cake lift, Rabbi.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies, you should be ashamed of yourself. You let a guy get in before you. Okay. Anyway, now so the bottom line of all of these halachas is that any and whatsoever distraction, interruption from the immediate sacred task at hand of drawing and sanctifying the water with the ashes for the purpose of purification will disqualify the operation. You have to be completely and utterly, absolutely focused, and any deviation, any distraction will disqualify it. So it seems very technical and very, very, a little bit over the top, but this is the most sacred of things, and therefore there could be no distractions whatsoever. Now, a quick quiz. Number one, if a person hired someone else to watch the water for the ashes, do an effort for him, may he now perform other tasks? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'd say yes.
Thank you very much. Correct. If a person performed work with one hand and sanctified water with the water, I think it should be with the other. Is the water acceptable? A, B, or C?
Hey,
See, I think.
Yes. See.
Depends on whether you
If
sent.
it's for himself, it's a problem. If it's for someone else, it's kosher.
Yeah, yeah.
In which of the following cases are the ashes or the water unacceptable? He took ashes, A, B, and C. Read it for yourselves.
I think number 3.
Okay. What?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say 4, so none of the above.
Yeah.
All
Not
of
the
the
above.
were acceptable. And finally, in which of the following cases is the water disqualified for both people involved? It's a tricky one, but we did have it.
Hmm.
Sorry?
P.
I can't hear?
P. Not P. C.
I hear B and I hear C. Okay, B is the winner. We read the difference between drawing and sanctifying. For one, you may take a wage, for another, you may not.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining, guys. Have a wonderful
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Shabbat tov.
Cheers, Rabbi.
all the
Thank
best.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheerio.